And I think this is another thing that I notice happening out in the culture that to me is actually a little bit alarming. And I think it can be a little dangerous from a psychological perspective. And that is this concept of diagnosis identity, which is basically when, say, you have a health problem and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, you have this, you meet all the diagnostic criteria of this disease, and they give you a diagnosis. You have hypothyroidism, or you have cancer, or you have lupus, or you have depression or PTSD or whatever it might be. This can be a physiological, a psychological, emotional diagnosis, whatever it might be. Well, what can happen with some people sometimes is that in a way that diagnosis somehow becomes kind of like entangled or enmeshed with their identity. Meaning that the disease or the sickness or the problem becomes so enmeshed with their sense of self, with their sense of who they are, that they don't, it's like a part of them kind of holds onto it, clings onto it. And I would say this is actually, what's even more alarming is when this happens from a self-diagnosis. Okay, so this is one of the problems with Google and everybody searching their problems on the internet is sometimes people don't even get an official diagnosis, but it's a self-diagnosis from Google. And when a diagnostic label becomes something that you're identified with and entangled with the sense of self, this is a really dangerous situation because it becomes an obstacle to cure. So, and I've had to work through this with clients before where it's like they don't do what they should do to heal themselves. Like a compliance issue, they don't follow the protocol. They say all this stuff, they want to do this, but then they don't follow through. And then it's like when you dig into it and look at it, it's like, hey, do you really want to heal? And it's like, what part of you is clinging on to this? And after kind of teasing that out, you realize like, whoa, like a part of your self-definition is tied to this diagnosis, right? Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I have Hashimoto's disease and narcolepsy, or I can never do that because of my social anxiety, or I can't, it's like, because the whole world begins to revolve around that diagnosis and not a positive way, in like a negative way, in a non-solution seeking way. And for some reason, it seems like in this modern culture that there can be a lot of like people being excessively celebrated based on their shortcomings, based on their traumas, based on their health problems, based on their psychological issues, rather than being celebrated for their positive virtues and characteristics. And so it seems like there can be this thing that happens where people are trying to over exemplify and identify with their problems because of maybe an underlying need for attention or sympathy or wanting some sort of special treatment, or in the, not everyone does this, but in some instances as a means for manipulating others. And I think this is a little bit of a dangerous situation, specifically because it becomes an obstacle to cure. So again, I don't want anyone to misconstrue what I'm saying. People have real problems. People have suffering. People, when people get a diagnosis, it can be very, very scary. Okay. It can, getting a cancer diagnosis, that's a scary thing. Like that's a psychological and emotional blow. That is like a major challenging moment in one's life. To be sure, I'm not doubting that. I'm not denying that. I'm not saying people don't suffer or that people don't deserve or should, receive compassion or sympathy. I'm also not saying we should just ignore our problems, as obviously that's not a good approach. But what I am saying is that you can't over-identify your sense of self, of who you are with your disease or with your health problem. And you have to learn to cultivate a way of seeing it as an obstacle to overcome. It's like you have to be able to see beyond it. And I think that's where the role of hope and faith come into our healing process, that we have to be able to see onto the other side of it. We can't get too lost. We can't get too scared. We can't get too worried or anxious or depressed about it, because what happens is that now it has power over you. And that's a deep, dark black hole. I think there is a psychological process that happens when we receive especially very serious diagnoses that we have to learn how to navigate that territory. We have to learn to fortify our minds to not fall into the black pits of despair, hopelessness, faithlessness, fear, worry, anxiety. Certainly those things can emerge, but we have to learn to overcome those things. We have to become strong. And I think that strength is how we overpower these types of things. Now, I'm not saying rely only on hope and faith to overcome your health problems. Am I saying only have hope and faith? No, I think it's good to address things from a multifactorial approach. But what I am saying is that if your identity is wrapped up in your diagnosis, it's going to be very hard to heal it, because if you heal it, then who are you? There's a part of the self that latches onto the diagnosis and actually doesn't want to let it go, because if the disease is healed, if the problem is cured, and then it's like, if your identity is wrapped up in it, then you have an identity crisis. And it's like, well, who am I if I don't have my chronic migraines anymore and get the sympathy and the days off work and the paid sick leave and the whatever it might be? Like, there can be ways that our health problems become a crutch, actually, and become a subtle way that sometimes people can manipulate people and situations. Obviously, I'm not saying everybody does that, but it happens. I've seen it happen. Maybe you know someone and have seen that happen as well. So when you let your disease have power over you, or when you overly identify it, I create something that gets in the way of your healing process.